Good morning and welcome everyone back to all our listeners to our third episode of Evidence Meets Emotion, where we explore the science behind what makes us learn to love and to be human. If anyone's missed our first two episodes, the first one we talked about what is the definition of love, what is passionate love, and then our second episode we transitioned into how we transition from passionate love to empathic love and what are the benefits of being able to have such a kind of love. Today we're going to be diving into two very fundamental and important concepts to help us understand relationships, which is attachment styles and love languages. Have you ever wondered why one person wants to talk through every conflict immediately and another person needs space? Why buying flowers for one person means everything and to other person might mean completely nothing? So these are the concepts we're going to explore today and actually look at what the evidence says behind all of this so we can better understand ourselves as well as our relationships and how we can bring some meaningful concepts to apply into our daily lives. I have my incredible co host here and the author of the amazing book, Love Happiness, Vincenzo Berghella. And as always, we always start with gratitude. So, Vince, I'll let you take it, say a few words, what you're grateful for, and we'll jump right in.
Well, Kavya, first of all, let me say it's wonderful to see your happy face, so empathic, so excited. That's my first gratitude for sure today. Just
Oh, thank you.
looking at you, I am extremely excited myself about this. I'll just share a quick luck gratitude thing. On Friday, I'm supposed to give a lecture in New York, long standing. And I'm so lucky because on Thursday night, my oldest son, Andreas, drove into Providence himself to see his girlfriend, who actually now lives in Philadelphia, but her parents live there. And so I'm going to drive with him to New York. He's going to drop me. And then Friday afternoon, I'm going to go to Greenwich, Connecticut, where my second son lives, spend some time at work with him. He's moving to Philadelphia. So I'm going to see where he's worked the last few years. And then we're going to drive back all the way to Manhattan and where he lives and back to Philadelphia. So big gratitude to spend time with, two of my sons. What about
Amazing.
you?
Amazing. I love that. And again, that just, it's all about love, right? Like the
Yeah.
moments, the reason you're so excited about those moments, it all comes down to love. Thank you for sharing that. I would say for me, same. I think a lot of gratitude about family, of course. Like, even sometimes the simple moments that we may overlook or take for granted. Like last night, my husband was out of town working, but was home yesterday. And then we all caught up together with all the kids, my mother in law, and just had a nice, lovely family dinner on Monday. And with this very busy work schedule and life, when we can get the whole family together on an ordinary day, just to sit down for a simple meal, it is so heartwarming. And just have so much gratitude. It really filled my cup to start off the week with so much love in my heart. So that was wonderful. Yes.
Good for you.
And today we want to talk about attachment styles. And in your book, you have this beautiful chapter that you talk about it in so much detail. And I really love it. I even have my little cheat sheet here with so many points to discuss. But maybe if you can start us off, Vince, and share a little bit about what is, attachment styles. You talk about the three different types of attachment styles. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yes, thanks, Kavita. Yeah, when I read this book, it really changed the way I look at love and relationships in general. And the first point is the three different attachment styles. Secure, number one, anxious, number two, and avoidant, number three. And we'll dwell into those in detail. And the second point that the books make, it's actually that it's good to be attached. That if you depend on someone emotionally, we have here, evidence meets emotions. There's a lot of evidence actually that if you feel like you belong, is probably not the right word nowadays, but that you really bond with somebody, with your partner in a secure way, and you can count on their love, that makes a big difference in your life, health wise, happiness wise,
Mm-hmm.
and love wise. So let's review those three attachment styles. So about 50% of us have a secure attachment styles. And some of the initial scientific data actually comes from pediatric psychologist studies. So picture us, when we were 1 or 2 or 3, and I have kids stay young at home now, and I can see it every day. Um, and there's three kinds of reactions when, for example, your mother or your main attachment person, your it could be sometimes your grandparent or your father, whomever you're most attached to when you're really young, and it's usually breastfeeding mom or a mother most of the time. Um, if the mother leaves the room where you're playing, as a 1 or 2 or 3 year old, and you can count on her coming back, she really loves you, she's very affectionate, she gives you what's called unconditional love. So just, you know, what I do with my kids all the time, kiss them all the time, I love you to death. And, you can certainly, give them directions in life and feedback and stuff, but they know that you're there for them. When they wake up, you're there. When they go to sleep, you're there, kind of thing. And or when they get hurt, more importantly, you're there. They don't cry. They don't do anything. They continue to hopefully be in their flow, play with their toys, and that's a secure attachment style. Meaning, you can count on the person you're attached to, and it starts when you're really, really young. There's a second set of people, about 20-25%, who instead are anxious in their attachment style. And the example, going back to being a little kid, is that maybe you can't really count on your mother or your significant, attachment person as much. Let's say you, so for some reason, think that your mother likes an older sibling, or that sometimes your mother works so much or is not available as much that you don't really know exactly if they're coming back or not. And so for whatever reasons, and sometimes to no fault of the parent, you're just more anxious about that. And when the mother leaves, you don't stay in flow, you don't stay quiet, you're fidgety, you're moving around, you may share a tear or two, and you're really anxious the whole time. Is this person coming back? You're not sure. The minority of people, less than 10-20%, are avoidant, the third and last. And those people, unfortunately, most of the time, as an infant, were exposed to a mother or a significant, caregiver who was not available, basically, who, for whatever reasons, and I always think about people that maybe disappear because they went to jail, or they were using drugs, or they were sick, or for whatever reason, sometimes no fault of their own either, couldn't be there for the kid. The kid kind of had identified them as the caregiver, and then as they were playing, the caregiver left. They didn't come back once. They came back eventually, but they left again, and they didn't come back for a long time. And at first they would cry, and the avoidance style is kind of like, at the beginning you're crying, you're desperate, you're unsure, the person is coming back to provide for you. But eventually you get so disheartened, you're so emotionally distraught that you cannot count on this important person, the one most important person for you, that you give up. And that's where the avoidance come. You kind of, you're like, I'm not going to get hurt again. I'm just going to stay away from this relationship, and I'm not going to count on them. So if they stay or live, I'm just going to play with my toys, or try to stay out of trouble or whatever. And that's obviously a very sad thing that some of us grew up with. And basically, the last point I want to make here at the beginning is that your style, your attachment style, either secure, anxious, or avoidant. By the time you're 5 or 6 or 7, it's set. I think a lot of other things are set by the time you're 5 to 8, in terms of happiness, health, a lot of different things. But certainly this attachment style is set, and it's going to reflect on your relationships when you're older. And that's the main point of this issue, that if you have a secure attachment, you can go into a relationship, when you're 20 or 30 or a teenager or whatever, kind of trusting that love exists, thinking that you can find somebody to trust and you can spend your life with, and that person becomes even more important than your mother, than your
Mm,
caregiver when you were young, and should be. Versus if you're anxious, then you enter relationships being anxious, and no matter how loving this person is, maybe you don't trust her as much. It's hard
mhm,
for you to count on them, not because of that person. Nothing wrong with your partner. It's just the way you live things as a young kid. And avoidant people get into relationships, but they're the ones that, in terms of emotions and sharing and saying I love you, or sometimes even being touchy and compassionate and empathic, are a little harder. They're not bad people
mhm,
at all, but they went as they were young with mothers or caregivers who couldn't be there for them,
mhm.
and that kind of left an imprint on their attachment style.
Wow. Now, thanks so much for sharing that, Vince. And as you're sharing all this, I had some questions that, like just from a scientific curiosity. First of all, I'm so happy to hear at least majority, 50% are
Yeah,
secure. But I'm just curious, like, do you know approximately when those stats are from? Like, because you think about, I wonder how women have, integrated in society has changed so much over the years. Like, a lot of moms are now working moms, they tend to be gone a lot more. And, even like maternity leave is sometimes short. They're gone. Do you think that may have impacted? You think we do the numbers today? Do you think there would be a higher number of more anxious or avoidant because parents are not there? What do you think? I'm just curious.
I don't think so. I'm actually going to make the example. My wife, current Federica, works full time. Um, but it's not just the time you're in. It's the quality of the time. And,
Mm,
you can surely, again, we have a 4 and a 3 year old. You can tell them, like, look, I'm going to take you to school today, but this afternoon, somebody
mm,
else may pick you up, your grandparents or a nanny or whatever. But I'll be in later on tonight. Or, today you won't
wow.
see me because you're on call. We're OBGYNs and, we may be away. Or the next 3 days I may go on a trip. And, our 4 year old doesn't say 3 days, it says tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. You
That's so
say 3 days.
cute.
So, if it's 4 days, you have to say, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, 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 tomorrow. And every day wakes up and says, okay, mom is back in tomorrow, 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 right? And you say, yes, it's 3 days now. So I think it's the quality, of the
Uh-huh.
relationship, and it's the expectations
Yeah.
about the relationship. And so I don't think, and again, you go back 50, 100, a million years, um, even if you had all the time in the world, sometimes because of personalities or maybe because the way you were brought up, maybe a mom was avoidant, and even if you're there all the
Mm,
time, it's hard for you to be caring, and
yeah.
maybe you're present, but you know back then you're busy with chores, or I don't know, reading the newspapers, or buying food, and not really present for the kids. So I don't think those things have changed. One good point, which I was really happy to see, is that while the majority of us stay in those three attachment styles, that research says that 20 to 25% of the time, those can change.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, secure can go to anxious and vice versa,
Mm-hmm.
but also sometimes an avoidant in a really nice relationship, maybe with a secure person, eventually can become, less avoidant, for example, and switch attachment style. Most of the time you stay, unfortunately or fortunately, in what you were genetically and you were imprinted as a young kid. uh,
Mm-hmm.
but the effect of a partner also has a kind of a um,
Mm.
uh, third issue that can change and
Mm-hmm.
help your attachment styles.
I love that. I love that. So
Yeah,
I think you kind of highlight like the nature versus nurture, right? Because I think like the
right.
genetically, because I remember reading in your book too, which I thought was very interesting, that there's actually genetically there's more dopamine receptor association for patients with anxious attachment and more serotonin receptors. So like you are programmed genetically at some point, and then the nurturing sounds like a two-hit hypothesis to me. It's like your parents, and then the second thing is your partner that can influence so much of that. Can you tell us a bit more about that, the receptor thing at all, or like the nature versus nurture, especially as a parent, because you highlight such an important point here that it's not just about the time, it's the qualities, how you are parenting.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking at the book myself, as everything it's written here, and people can read it. So you're right. It looks like the avoidant attachment styles. Some studies have shown that the serotonin 5-HT1A receptor allele is more associated with avoidant thing. So some of it is DNA,
Yeah.
and this is also from twin studies, like everything, being introverted or extroverted, be more math or less math. A lot of it
Mhm.
it's in our genes, up about 50% of it. And for example, you're right, the anxious attachment style is associated with the dopamine receptor, DRD2 allele. So some of it it's passed on, and again, I would say most of it, I would say it's 50-50. You could be more anxious because of the gene you got, but maybe the gene came from your grandmother and your parents are both secure and they're
Mhm.
present. Maybe you can switch a little bit more to
Yeah.
secure, and vice versa. Maybe you don't have those genes, you're more secure in your attachment, but then, your caregiver, for some reason, was not as present, didn't give you so much of this unconditional love. But it is sure that we are imprinted for love. And I guess when we
Mhm.
talk about love, Kavita,
Mhm.
and we said it before, we are, village people. We are made to be together, and our
Mhm.
partner is really the biggest influence on our happiness, on the wellness, health, and psychological. And more and more research proves it. And again, our parents and our main caregiver is so important. Sometimes I think I said it before. I say that parents should have a license, before having a kid, because it's not just the DNA you pass, which is obviously very important, but the way you grow, the way you love a
Mhm.
child when they're 6 months, a year, or 2 or 3, it really, you know, projects their lifestyle. We talk about diabetes, and if you don't control it, you're bigger, and or hypertension, you can pass it
Mhm.
down. But I think this is as important, if not more important, than those, medical issues.
I love that. And in your book, you highlight that, especially for us and most of our audience listening, probably, being in the OBGYN, MFM, where like we actually play a very important role in helping forming these strong, beautiful attachments since early. Because I think a lot of this impact happens since baby's in the womb. Like if a mom is taking
Yeah.
great care of her health versus mom that might be, unfortunately having addiction problems or any other health issues, it does impact the love or how they're showing that attachment to the child, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It starts really, really early, and there may be less research, or maybe actually the people listening to us, the MFMs and OPs can do more research about the in utero effect. But the earlier the effect, the more the early the behavior, the more of an effect.
Mm-hmm.
We always think the kid is not going to talk till they're 1 or 2, and therefore this period doesn't really matter. I mean, tender love and care, when you're 2 months old, and breastfeeding and all of that changes your life for sure. and
100%.
and again, when you're 8 or more, 90+% of all this is all done. So you better concentrate on those early months, weeks, years.
Mm-hmm.
um, After that, it's going to be school and the village and their friends. But a parent has a huge, huge effect in the first
Yeah.
few months. And
100%. And I'll share a personal story here, kind of about my
beautiful.
own, because I've also obviously done a lot of work into understanding my own attachment style and everything. I come from a very, very loving, supportive family. Like my mom was always there, my dad's always been very loving. But when I was little girl at first grade, so about 6 years old, my family sent me away to boarding school in
Yeah.
India. So I'm from Thailand, but growing up in Thailand, there were not a lot of international schools then. So they wanted to make sure I learned English. So it was from a place of love. They wanted the best for me, but they took me to this boarding school up in the Himalayas, right? And they're like, oh, I was so excited that they were there with me. And then one day they're like, okay, but now you're staying here and we're leaving, right? And I think, as a little child at 6 years old, that's a very, I think it really imprinted a lot from me. Like, I was not able to then contact my parents for several months because it was a rules in the school. You're taken care of just by the teachers, which was a very loving, nurturing environment. But you're right, it does imprint a lot. And when I became as an adult, I realized I could see these signs sometimes show up. I'm like, all constantly worrying, like, will people leave? Will people leave? And when I think back, I'm like, but I came from such a loving family. I have no doubt my parents love me unconditionally. But even certain situations like this that you may go through really does impact. And to your point, you're also right that once you identify how your attachment style is, you can do the work to change that. And I think we all owe it to ourselves to find out what our attachment style is so we can ask ourselves the important questions like, where does this come from? Is this who I want to continue to be? And you're right, like the full circle moment is when you have a healthy, secure relationship. That is your safe space to then transition to a secure attachment style. Like with my husband, that's been a significant and a beautiful journey to myself becoming more secure too. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing. It's so important also to, first find out. I mean, that's where it
Yeah.
starts. It's always know yourself. We always
Yeah.
stress that, Kavita, right? You and I know yourself. In this case, you can take a test. Again, attached is the book and free test and kind of score yourself. You probably know already. And then tell your partner,
Mm-hmm.
look, this is me for whatever reasons, it's not really, we always blame our parents, but sometimes there's nothing wrong. Like your story is a perfect example. They're doing the best for you, and it just happens to be that maybe there's side effects that makes you a little bit more anxious, with them being away and you being at boarding school. um, but then if you know it, if your partner knows it, you can work on that, and maybe in that case your partner can be more reassuring. And again, I love you, you're the best person for me, being present, kind of reassuring, you. And, some people need that a little bit more and some people don't. And
Mm-hmm.
some people don't like it. The avoidance maybe, or like, you know what? I think that in life we should go parallel life. We can be at the same house, but I'm having my life, you're having your life. I don't want too much sharing, still in their loving way. And as long as we all know, we can respect each other, we can love each other in the way the other one wants to be loved, right? We talk about that. You love the other one the way they want to be loved, not the way you think you
Mm-hmm.
you want to love them. So important. And some people may say, look, I grew up this way. I found out, for example, I'm an avoidant and I'm better that way. And look, if we're going to start a relationship, and you can say this in the first few dates, for example, some people want to live themselves. Some people don't want to, live together, especially at a certain age. Maybe people have gone through a couple of divorces. They're like, they're not, so passionate anymore about, being together. And, but they still want to have a relationship, and they still want to have a positive relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important that you find out this stuff at the beginning. The sooner the better, because a lot of people think, oh my God, I don't know how to love. He's resisting me. He doesn't want to go out as much as I want. He doesn't want to, again, live together. He's not ready for marriage. Well, maybe that has nothing to do with you. It's
Mm-hmm.
something to do with them. It's something
Right.
that maybe their parents were divorced. Maybe they didn't have secure attachment styles, examples in their life,
Mm.
or not as much as, for example, as you did or I did. And you need to respect that, and know that, and give them time, and love them again in the way they want to be loved.
Yeah. No, I love that. And again, it keeps coming back to parenting, and you highlighted one point in your book that I also really love that I think ties these two topics very well together is attachment and love languages, which we'll address in a second. Because you can have two children growing up in the same household that want to be loved in completely different ways, right? And I
Absolutely.
think loving them in a way that means that's meaningful to each of them actually fosters that secure attachment because you can say I'm like loving, this is how I love all my children the same, but actually you might be, it's not meeting their needs and you might not be fostering secure attachment. And you probably have more experiences this as a dad. And do you want to share a little bit or expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, something comes to mind, and again, I love both my parents, and I hope this comes out, the right way. But my dad was the one, and unfortunately passed away 6 years ago. Was the one, well, now 7 years ago, actually. He was the one who was more the strong one, and actually wasn't tender love and care kind of person. Was more stern and things like that. Very big guy. While my mom was the unconditional love, typical, very secure love kind of person. And it's interesting that at the beginning of my love life, so to speak, sometimes I would look for people like my dad emotionally that maybe we're not as outgoing, we're not as attached,
Mm,
like my dad was always like, I'm me or you,
mm,
yes, you're my son, but but I yearned for his love so much, maybe in an anxious style. Now that I think about it, it's the first time I'm, you know, doing a psych therapy your life. Um, I wanted to meet people like that and then change them
mm,
because maybe I wanted to change my dad, to make
mm,
him like my mom. Um,
mhm,
and later I discovered that people like I could have never changed my dad.
mm,
He was comfortable with who he was. I think his mother was like that, really stern and disciplinarian kind of person, uh,
mm,
and less like he would never hug or kiss or anything, um, and realized that genetically and security wise, I'm like my mom,
mm,
unconditional love, very extroverted and touch loving. We'll talk about love languages in a minute, kind of guy, and it's just more comfortable for me. It's not like again, I love my dad just as much as my mom. My dad is responsible for so much of my success and my in fact even self-esteem, the way he loved
mm,
me, because when he said I did something right, it would count. He would tell me that every 3 years. My mom would tell me every day. So if Mehmet told me, that made a huge impact on my brain. But that's something that to pass on to people, my experience, to also realize not only who you are, but who you need. You were
mm,
talking about you and your partner, your husband, and who makes you well,
mm.
make sure you partner with somebody who makes you feel well as also.
Mhm. I love that you bring that up because I think this is exactly, when you're finding a partner, right? The topic of what kind of partners you get drawn to, and I think
Mhm. Yeah,
unless you know who you are, you had, like you mentioned, even in the book, you were in the beginning maybe trying to find a partner that's more avoidant because you're trying to change your that. And you're right, because I think there are two key points that influence how the partner we try to attract if we are not fully aware yet.
right.
And it all arises subconsciously, right? I think the first one is we get attracted to the partner that is kind of like the person we are trying to change, like your dad. There was something you were craving that was lacking. You're like, well, if I can
Mhm.
find them, I can fix this problem that will undo all the
Which
trauma
was
I've
my
had.
problem.
Correct, yes. Exactly. Or the second subconscious projection that leads to how we choose our partner can be we are trying to find the partner that kind of meets the bias we have formed about ourselves. Meaning, like, if you thought I'm anxious, I never got love as a child, that's the only kind of relationship I always deserve in my life. And then you subconsciously trying to find a person that helps to reaffirm that false belief that you've had. So you find an avoidant partner who now continues to keep you in this cycle where you're not getting the love. And you're like, yeah, this is what I've deserved my whole life. It's reaffirming a false belief, right? But that ends up becoming a very difficult situation we find
Yeah.
ourselves in. So I think it's important, unless we've done the work to really know who we are and what kind of love we deserve and need.
Yeah.
'Cause I think the deserving part is another important part. A lot of people, when they become especially anxious or avoidant, they believe that that's all they deserve in their life because that's all they've known as their imprint or their blueprint for love. But I think for everyone listening, it's so important to realize like that blueprint that was formed in your childhood does not have to be a blueprint for life. Like you can deserve a wholesome, a secure life, love, right? What are your thoughts about that, Vince?
Oh, I agree. I agree 100%. I'm just absorbing and loving everything, every word you're saying. Yeah, a couple of things come to mind. One is that sometimes, let's make an example of a secure person with an avoidant person. They can be together their whole life, but I think it's really sad if after 30, 40, 50 years of language of marriage, you realize that partner maybe didn't provide as much as you would have needed. And also, a lot of people say, oh, this is about me, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
a lovable person, I don't deserve it. And your point of you deserve it is so important. So if you want somebody who is secure in their love and loves you back the way you want, look for that. Sometimes it's actually great to be with an anxious person. I think there's a lot of
They
benefits of
give a
being with
lot.
an anxious person because they want to be with you, they're looking for you, they want to be say they love you, and they want to spend a lot of time with you, and I think that's great. And I'll tell you another example. Maybe it's a little extreme, but I think it's true in a lot of couples and a lot of people. Sometimes in life, for some people, I think for 100% of people, love should be important. But for some people, like, maybe they have a calling in life and they want to be, I don't know, Einstein or, the Dalai Lama. No, the Dalai Lama, I don't think is married, or Nelson Mandela. Like, you have something so
Mm-hmm.
important that maybe consciously or unconsciously you may want to have an avoidant style
Mm-hmm.
partner who, if you're away for a month, doing something for whatever work reason or calling reason is fine. It's
Mm-hmm.
fine there and not miss you as much as a anxious person, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends a little bit what you want, and I think all of this attachment styles can have their pluses and minuses, but it's important that you choose.
Mm-hmm.
That you first decide who you are, and then decide, okay, you know what, I think for me the best attachment type will be X, and then
Mm-hmm.
interrogate, have the person you're dating take those tests and kind of find out about their upbringing and how they felt their attachment style was, with their as a 2-year-old.
Yeah. No, I love that. In your book, you made one statement that I really loved because you talked a lot about attachment. And when you said there's attachment style stays pretty much similar from childhood to adulthood, but there's one key difference. And that is that adult attachment style has to be reciprocal, right? We
Yeah,
must know how to give because as a child, you're just on the receiving end that's influencing your attachment. You have no true responsibility, I guess,
yeah,
to create or inspire your parents' attachment style, for they've already been formed. But as a partner, when you're choosing your partner, you can come in as whatever. Let's say you're an anxious person and you have a partner that's avoidant, and you can't just stay here and say, I'm anxious, so they need to meet me here and keep giving me the reassurance. Because for the avoidant partner, that is a lot of emotional ask, right? And for the avoidant person to say, oh, I'm avoidant, I recharge by being alone, I need space when we have conflict, then you're leaving the anxious person even more anxious. And it's just, you're spiraling into two loops that keep getting further and further apart from each other. And I think this is where that empathic love comes in, right? It all ties back to empathy, to say, I know I'm anxious, but I also recognize my partner is avoidant. So, how can we slowly change the dance steps to kind of come towards each other? Because the anxious person cannot go all the way to be avoidant, the avoidant cannot, but if both people slowly take work to move towards each other, you find a common ground where security exists. And you learn to have a dance step that's your own rhythm. And I think in every relationship that will look different, and I think a lot of couples, because what I've noticed, anxious avoidant do tend to get attracted to each other a lot, again because of that subconscious philosophy, right, where you're like, the anxious
Yeah,
person believes they don't deserve love, so they find an avoidant partner.
yeah,
The avoidant person thinks like, oh, they want love but they don't want to ask for it. So when they have the anxious partner who's giving them love without them having to ask for it, they love it, but then it starts showing up in their relationship later. And there's so many ways to change the dance step, because I think that's where a lot of couples end up separating, because they don't know how to change the dance step. It ends up becoming distance and distance and distance. But I think, to my point, is it's not impossible to move from whatever you are to more secure, using empathy as your guidance. Because I think when you have love, you have empathy, that will make you want to change. And it's not, it doesn't feel like I have to change for my partner, like why should I change for X, Y, and Z, but you want to because you care so much about the relationship, right? What are your thoughts, Vincent?
yeah. No, no, I agree 100%. And we said at the beginning, 20 to 25% of the time, people can
Mm-hmm.
change, and go from. It's actually both ways. You can go from avoidant to anxious to secure, but also from secure to anxious to avoidant, depending on your partner attachment style. And I think another important thing, and we talked about it when we talked about empathic love, um, not only this thing of getting together and finding compromises, but also acceptance. I think an even more important point is
I love
acceptance.
that.
That's why communication, Kavit, is so important. You
Mhm.
communicate, and you tell, hey, I am this way. Let me find out how you are. Let's find some compromises. But at the end, I think the truly lasting empathic love is acceptance.
Yes.
And saying, you know what, I understand the way you were brought up. You're anxious. Maybe sometimes, it bothers me that, I can't, go to the grocery store, and because you miss me so much, or which happens, in some people. But that's great. You know what? I understand it. I love you the way you are. And I love that phrase. I love you the way you are. And I'm just going to respect and love that. I think the important is at the beginning, if you know that you cannot accept that,
Mm-hmm.
just move on and go into another relationship. Don't realize that after 30 years together,
Yes.
um, because it's a lot of work to try to change, and it's much easier from the beginning to know who you are, know your
Mm.
partner, and accept. You first have to accept yourself, hopefully, and know you're enough, but also know your partner is enough,
Yeah.
just the way he is, just the way she is,
Yeah.
just
No.
the way just the way they are. I mean, be
Yeah.
gender neutral as well.
No, that's absolutely so true. And I think for people who may be already there like 15 years or so and still are kind of in this dance, or are still like figuring out, but they love this person so much they don't want to leave anymore. I think just to highlight also, there are resources out there to help people through this, right? Like, there, you don't have to feel like, well, this is my life and I have to remain unhappy like this forever. I think therapy, couples therapy, is excellent to help people kind of see things from each other's perspective or change that dance step. There are amazing books. Like, for me, I'll tell you one book that really helped me, was it's called Secure Love.
Hmm.
I'm blanking on the author's name now, but an amazing book. There's just so many books on attachment styles and how to kind of meet your partner, and sometimes reading about your partner's attachment style and how they function without even talking, and just reading about what the science says about who they are. Suddenly you have so much empathy for them, and you're like, oh, okay, this, it's not about me, it's about them. And I think those are some beautiful ways to help you kind of push past some of those hurdles, because they do come up. Yeah.
Agreed. Agreed.
And we talked a lot about attachment styles, and I think it kind of segue into also understanding each other's love languages. So I just kind of wanted to touch on that a little. I know, Vince, you have a beautiful chapter on that. So do you want to tell us a little bit about, I think the 5 different love languages?
Yeah, I could talk about love languages all the time. When I first read this book by Gary Chapman, it really changed the way I look at love. So 5 love languages. Let me see: words of affirmation, physical touch, gifts, quality time, and acts of kindness.
Yeah.
And the idea is that, again, some of those are either some innate, going back to nurture and nature. So nature, genetics, some of it, and some are also nurture. The way you were brought up. Again, going back to
Mm-hmm.
early years and your parents or your caregivers. Um, and you can take a test. If you put
Yes.
5 love languages into your phone or your computer,
Mm-hmm.
it's an easy free test, and then it scores you.
Mm-hmm.
And while we should all be very proficient at all 5 languages, the truth is we have some preferences. Again, because of nature and nurture or both. And for example, for me, my top two, and usually you should look at so there's a top one or top two, and you should concentrate on those. Or physical touch, so hugs and kisses and holding hands, whatever, and words of affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
I always make the example of my sister, who is number one gift, and she's the
Mm-hmm.
best gift giver in the world. I know that she knows that. I make an effort to make her to give her gifts because that's the way she likes to be loved. It's hard for me, but again, you speak all 5 languages, and you should know your partner's love language. Acts of kindness, I think it's a unbelievable, so wonderful, love language. That means that if you like cherries, your partner buys
Mm-hmm.
cherries, or if you're going out to dinner, your partner books your favorite restaurant, or if you're a messy person, your partner helps you, cleaning up, or putting your socks in the right drawer or whatever, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Little acts of kindness. And
Uh-huh.
in quality time, I have a lot of quality time too. I think it's another wonderful one. We always talk about the example of, you should spend an hour and a half every day with your partner, one
Mm-hmm.
on one. That's good for everyone, every couple,
Mm-hmm.
if you have quality time or not. And knowing them, knowing the ones you have, and knowing the one your partners have is super, super important.
Yeah. No, I love that. What would you say are your top two, Vince? I'm curious. You said
Yeah, I
quality.
just said, the top two are physical touch. So I'm
Uh,
a surely a hugger,
yeah.
kisser, holding hands, pack in the back kind of thing. Even if these days I have to watch, what I do. But certainly, with my partner, that's a big time love language. Even, and I'll be somewhat personal. Even during sleep, touching each other, feeling each other's warmth, or sitting down on a couch and being next to each other, maybe massaging each other or whatever. Doesn't have to be sexual.
Mm-hmm.
And then words of affirmation. That was my mom for sure, because my mom always told me lots of compliments, and I like to compliment people as well.
Yeah.
That's an important point, actually. Your love languages, usually your top 2 or 3, you like to receive them. So those are the languages. So if I do something well, somebody gives me a gift, I feel it less, even if I like gifts, I feel it less that if somebody says, job well done, word of affirmation.
Mm.
Uh, but at the same time, I also like so I like to receive them. I also like to give them.
Mm.
So if people know me, it's not only important that they know to, again, give me a hug, if they want to do something nice to me, but that if I give them a hug, I give it from love, and but I need to be careful because some people have zero in physical touch.
Yes.
And one of my partner, MFM attendings, has zero in the love language of physical touch, and I make sure I never hug her, and instead maybe I spend some quality time for her with her. That's her number one love language. So not only with your partner, but even in life,
Yeah.
your partners, your co-residents, your co-medical students, your family, your sister, your mom, your dad, your
Mhm.
kids, they all have their favorite love languages. And it's super important for a healthy relationship
Mhm.
to know not only yours, but maybe even more importantly, their love language.
Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
yours?
I love that you shared that. So mine are first two are quality time and physical touch. Very much physical touch as well. I'm definitely a hugger. And your story that you shared reminds me of my own personal story too. When before I knew about the concepts of love languages and stuff, that it was early in residency. I hug everyone. Like I'm always like so happy to give everyone a big hug. And there was this co-resident of mine I just met. We had been texting and emailing. Finally met in person. So I just walked up and gave a big hug, and she just stood still like this. And she's like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, yeah, no, no physical touch there.
And I was like, "Oh, okay. I am so sorry." And that's when I learned. I was like, "Okay, not everyone likes to be
Yeah,
hugged." And to me, like before I understood the concept of love languages, like that blew my mind. I'm like, who would not want to be hugged, right? Like it's such a beautiful feeling. But that's where you learn what other people's love languages are, and you have to respect that, right? Because you don't want to keep pushing your love language on them. But yeah, for me, definitely physical touch and quality time. I would say gifts are probably my last one too. Because growing up, I also think there's probably, do you think there's like nature versus nurture kind of for love languages too? I think you kind of learn them, right? Because I think growing up in my family, it was always about let's spend time together. It was we were never
wow.
big on gifts or anything. Like even if it was birthdays or even it was always like let's all just sit and talk together. And we had so much of that. We will every night family dinner was always sit down at the table, the whole family together. We talk about our day. So like those moments for me mean a lot more than if you bought me like a really fancy gift. I'd be like, okay, thank you, but can we just go talk for 2 hours? Like that will make me so much happier. Yeah.
Yeah, no, no, no. It's so key, I think, for all of our relationships to know this. And I always go back to another thing that when I was a teenager and I was thinking about love and struggling, I was like, do you should you spend to get time together with opposites or to people, more similar to you? And I think the evidence, certainly for everything we've talked about, even going back to attachment styles, it's easier sometimes to be with somebody similar to you.
Hmm.
So again, if you're a gift person and your partner's a gift person, it's just
Hmm.
easier. You bond together. But at the same time, as long as you know what the other person
Hmm.
has, like, again, quality time is not one of my top two; it's my third. But I love quality time. If I know my partner's quality time, and I know the benefits of quality time, it's one of the love languages, the most benefits. I'm all for it, and again, I want to make love is making that a person happy, so I'll go for quality time. But if you struggle with some of the languages, let's
Hmm.
say, again, you're not a hugger, and you meet somebody on the first date, all they want to do is touch you in some way, even in hold your hands, at the table where you're having dinner. I think that that's an important thing to realize, sooner
Yeah.
rather than later. And you may realize, what? Actually, physical touch is not so bad. Maybe I didn't get the gene for physical touch. Maybe my parents weren't touchy-feely people, huggers. But maybe I missed that. Maybe let me give,
Hmm.
this guy a try or this girl a try and see if physical touch. But if you really see that, you know what, I'd rather, go out for a walk for 2 hours than get a hug, and quality time is really high, and on the other person, that partner doesn't have high quality time, they're always busy, they seem not to have time with you, then maybe there's another person out there who is,
Hmm.
they're all good people, and that these
Yeah.
are all virtues to have these love languages, but they don't match, what
Hmm.
you may need, so I think it's really important to. I realized in prior relationships, I went out with people for some time that a physical touch is a zero.
Mm.
I took it on myself that I'm like, okay, you know what, I'm unlovable, I don't deserve it, or you go on all kinds of strips. I didn't, but let's say, I smell, or my skin is not so soft, whatever trip you go into. And it's not bad at all. It's just that a person is a normal person and just they don't have that love language, which is normal. It just doesn't match as well with you.
Yeah. I love that you bring up that point. That thank you for sharing that story, that you felt like you blame yourself, because that's actually what happens a lot in relationships,
Mm.
right? And that is a cycle that just by some communication about understanding who we are, who our partner is, attachment style, love languages, that solves so many problems. Because you otherwise, you exactly like you end up blaming yourself, and then what you do is you try to change yourself, and then you become someone else that you're not truly, and you're not authentic. Over time, that breeds resentment, because you're like, oh my god, I did all this, I changed myself for this person, they still don't like me, and then it forms this cycle of that's not healthy and not happy for anybody, right? So I think just a little communication on the core concepts of what forms a healthy relationships very early in the relationship really sets it up for success. And I think as we are in a partnership, a long-term relationship, we both parties will grow and evolve, and hopefully evolve towards each other rather than away from each other, right? So constantly checking in, constantly communicating, I think, are just beautiful ways. But these are such important conversations that I think every relationship should have. So I think this has been such an insightful and meaningful, and I think super important discussion we had today.
Yeah, and pass it on. We discuss, Kavita, you and I, how we're mentors and mentees. We have a lot of trainees. We deal with at work. We have kids, and for example, I mentioned my two older sons. At the beginning, I know their attachment styles, and now they have very serious girlfriends, who they may be with for a long, long time, and I tell them all the time, look, in a relationship, this is your language, make sure that a person has it, or at least make sure that they know about it, so that they can give you the love you want. And even more importantly, you're going out with, Jennifer or Maria or whomever, made up names, obviously, make sure Jen's love language, make sure you're ready for the next 5, 10, hopefully
Mhm.
20, 50 years to give them gifts, because they're the number one love language, to give them quality time, to give them words of affirmation.
Mhm.
It just makes the relationship bond so much more. And I encourage everybody listening today, tell your partner, like you say, the beautiful example, Kavita, before. So somebody gets a hug, they don't like hugs. Tell whomever it is, especially your partner, look, instead of a hug, could you instead, make dinner tomorrow night? Acts of kindness. Could you instead, hold my hand, while we walk? Thank you
Mhm.
much. Could we go out to dinner, tomorrow, just
Yeah.
the two of us, quality time. Um, and and that makes the relationship, it just opens up
Yeah.
the flower, the
Yeah.
love is, and eventually, the flower doesn't last. Even the fruit that you can continue to grow and you know kind of feed from, the rest of your life.
I love that. That's such a beautiful way to wrap up. And to your point, I just want to add a little bit. While your partner is learning to love you in your love language and the way you want to be loved, also allow them to keep loving you in their love language too, because they also feel like they are able to, because that's how they know how to give love. And asking them to completely abandon the way they know how to give love to do something completely different might, for them, might feel like, I don't feel like I'm loving this person. So I think it's kind of a balance of all of the components. There are certain days if you're not a gift person, but your partner brings you gift, you
Yeah,
still excited, you still show appreciation because you know what? This is a big moment for them. They're expressing their love in that moment, and you
beautifully said.
receive it with gratitude, and you say, "Yes, it might not mean for me, but for this person, it means a lot." So back to empathy again.
Yeah, yeah. And realizing your point is maybe the best point. We'll finish with that. Realizing, what's happening, being comfortable and knowledgeable about what's happening. So, for example, your number one um, love language is gifts, and you give a gift, and maybe that a person is not gift, that's first language. That's fine. That a person knows, and like you say just now, appreciates that you're just, expanding and expressing more and expressing the love language you like. At the same time, if next day you take her out to dinner and spend 2 hours because your love language is quality time, that lover partner on that side appreciates it maybe even more because they know that you're making an effort. Um, so it's a beautiful, you know, uh, kind of going around circle in which you can use all the love languages and really bond, really going back to attachment, really form that attachment from which you really can't live without, once you do this stuff right.
Oh, that's so beautifully said, Vince. I want to thank all our listeners for listening in today. It's been like my heart is filled just talking about these topics and these stories as well. And I hope you got in the world today with so much love for the world around you, for the things you're doing, and most importantly, for yourself. And we look forward to seeing you back again next month. We will post our date and time once we have that confirmed. And most likely, we'll be covering next time the essential love elements and the factors associated with successful long term love. So, thank you so much again for joining us and have a wonderful day.
Bye bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.